everybody, welcome back to Storytime with Lianne again. Today we are going to read Mrs. Wobble the Waitress. Are we ready? Listening ears on then. Mrs. Wobble was a waitress. She liked her work. The customers liked her. The only trouble was she wobbled. One day Mrs. Wobble wobbled with a bowl of soup. The soup landed on a customer's dog. Mrs. Wobble got told off. The next day Mrs. Wobble wobbled with a roast chicken. The roast chicken landed on a customer's head. Mrs. Wobble got told off again. The next day Mrs. Wobble wobbled with a plate of jelly, and the jelly landed on the manager's head. Mrs. Wobble got the sack. Oh dear. Mrs. Wobble went home to her family. Mr. Wobble cooked her tea. The children tried to cheer her up. "Cheer up, Mummy," they said. "You will find another job in another cafe." But there were no other cafes. That was the only one in the town. And Mrs. Wobble knew this. "There are no other cafes," she said, and she began to cry. The children did not like to see their mummy crying. It made them cry, and it made their daddy cry too. Then Mr. Wobble had an idea. "I know what we can do," he said. "We can open a cafe of our own." "Where?" said Mrs. Wobble. "Here," said Mr. Wobble. "We can turn the house into a cafe." The next day the Wobble family turned their house into a cafe. They cleaned and painted. They moved the chairs and tables around, and they changed the curtains. Mr. Wobble went shopping. He bought meat and vegetables and fruit and fish, cheese and chicken, flour and a few other things. The children went shopping too, and they bought 2 pairs of roller skates and a fishing net. "What are those for?" said Mr. Wobble. "It's a surprise, Daddy," the children said. "You wait and see." In the evening, Mrs. Wobble made the waiter's clothes for her children and a cook's hat for her husband. Mr. Wobble and the children made the menus. The children went to bed, and Mr. and Mrs. Wobble stepped outside. They looked at their new cafe. "It's the big day tomorrow," said Mr. Wobble. "We're going to make our fortune." "Yes," said Mrs. Wobble. "The only trouble is, what if I wobble?" The next day the children woke up early. "It's the big day today, Mummy," Master Wobble said. He gave his mum a cup of tea in bed. Miss Wobble gave her daddy a cup of tea in bed too. "We're going to make our fortunes today, Daddy," they said. After breakfast, Mr. Wobble began cooking. Mrs. Wobble and Miss Wobble laid the tables, and Master Wobble went round the town with a sandwich board. The first customers arrived. "Oh dear," said Mrs. Wobble. "What if I—" Mrs. Wobble wobbled with a bowl of soup. "Help!" said the customer. Miss Wobble skated to the rescue, and she caught the soup in another bowl. "Well, that's clever," the customer said. Mrs. Wobble wobbled with a roast chicken. "Wow!" said the customer. Master Wobble skated to the rescue. He caught the roast chicken in a net. "Hooray!" the customer said. Then all the other customers cheered. "Hooray! Hooray! This is more fun than the circus," they said. That night, Mrs. Wobble counted all of their money. "It looks like a fortune to us, Mummy," said the children. Mr. Wobble gave them all a big hug. "And we owe it all to the famous juggling waiters," he said. The next day there was a big crowd in the streets. The people had come from miles around to see the famous juggling waiters. The children peeped out. "There's a big crowd in the street, Mummy," they said. "Yes," said Mrs. Wobble, and she began to laugh. "Now the only trouble is, what if I don't wobble?" The end. Thanks for joining me today, guys. See you again soon.